Welcome to the wild world of simple and compound sentences, plus independent clauses and coordinating conjunctions. Simple and compound sentences are two of the four sentence types we'll be discussing, the other two being complex sentences and compound complex sentences, which will be in another video. We'll start here, and the first thing we want to discuss when looking at simple and compound sentences is to define what an independent clause is. An independent clause has two components. A, it has both a subject and a main verb, and B, it expresses a complete thought. So back to my go-to sentence that I use frequently, Jesus wept. We have a subject and we have a verb, and it expresses a complete thought. So that is a complete sentence in itself, and it's also an independent clause. Susan thought for several minutes. The underlined phrase there, Susan thought, is the independent clause. For several minutes isn't necessarily part of the clause. It's a prepositional phrase. And John threw the ball to Steve, because threw is an intransitive verb in that, a transitive verb in that sense. We need the direct object to complete the thought of the verb threw, and therefore that whole phrase is going to be considered an independent clause. But you can still see if we put a period after the word ball, it would still be a complete sentence. John threw the ball. The dentist's office closed early. The underlined portion is the independent clause. Even without the word early, the sentence would still be complete. The thought would be expressed, and there would be a subject and a main verb. Things get tricky in that an independent clause can have a compound subject, a compound verb, a compound adjective, or other compound elements and still be considered an independent clause. So we might have a compound subject, such as the first example. Tom and Rob, that's a compound subject, went to court. Jack butters and toasts, we have a compound verb. Jack was doing two different things, his bagels. Sarah and Jim, a compound subject. Gripe and complain, a compound verb, daily. I, subject, bought, single verb, a red and white, and there's a compound adjective, car. So all of the underlined parts there will be considered independent clauses, except I see that I have a little error right there. To court should be underlined as well. A simple sentence is simply an independent clause by itself. All of the previous examples of independent clauses are also examples of simple sentences. Tom and Rob went to court. Let me fix that little error so we don't have it anymore. Jack butters and toasts his bagels. Sarah and Jim gripe and complain. I bought a red and white car. All of these are independent clauses and examples of simple sentences. When you combine two independent clauses with a semicolon or with a coordinating conjunction, such as for, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so, you create a compound sentence. So that's two independent clauses joined by either a semicolon or a coordinating conjunction. Julie hates algebra, one independent clause, but, our coordinating conjunction. Bob loves it, the second independent clause. You can also use a semicolon. Julie hates algebra, semicolon. Bob loves it. Semicolon, one of the most abused punctuation marks in the English language, I think. You should always have an independent clause on both sides of the semicolon. Sally and June like the opera, independent clause. So, coordinating conjunction. They buy tickets, independent clause, each weekend. Their husbands dislike it, independent clause, yet coordinating conjunction, they don't complain. You can remember the list of coordinating conjunctions by the acronym FANBOYS, F-A-N-B-O-Y-S. So that's for and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. When you see any of those 7 coordinating conjunctions, you know you're probably looking at a compound sentence being used, 2 independent clauses put together. Really importantly, don't ever join 2 independent clauses with a comma alone. That's a comma splice, yet another of the most used and abused punctuation errors in the English language. Julie likes algebra, Bob hates it. Sarah ate steak, Tim drank beer. Be sure to add your coordinating conjunction in there to make the sentence correct. Go ahead and pause the video and look at these 4 sentences below, which ones are simple sentences and which ones are compound. And we'll come back in a minute with the answers. And there they are. Jerry gazes at the ocean with wonder and awe. A simple sentence with a prepositional phrase at the end. So that's an independent clause with a prepositional phrase after it. The dog eats once daily, for he is on a diet. It's compound. We see 4 are coordinating conjunction in between the 2 independent clauses. My mother and father are rich, semicolon. They own mansions and yachts. Anytime you see a semicolon, you know it's going to be a compound construction. Tim puts on jeans and a sports jacket. So even though we have a compound object there at the end, it's still just 1 independent clause, and it's a simple sentence on its own.